Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the Garrison Institute's virtual sanctuary through this live interactive webinar. Our guest today is John Tarrant and friends. John Tarrant is the director of Pacific Zen Institute. He teaches koans, dream work, and poetry. He wrote Bring Me the Rhinoceros and Other Zen Koans that will save your life and the light inside the dark, Zen, soul, and the spiritual life. He writes regularly for Lion's Roar and publishes in poetry magazines. John is a Zen Roshi who developed new ways to teach people with no experience of Zen or even meditation. John has a PhD in psychology and for many years had a practice in Jungian dream work. He helped design and develop the pioneering art of medicine curriculum for the Fellowship in Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona. Developed the leadership program for physicians and executives at Duke Integrative Medicine, and in addition, designed a mind-body arts curriculum for the large medical residency system at Duke Health. Before we begin today's session, I'll go over a few items about our call. We're on a Zoom webinar, so participant audio and video are off. You'll only see the teachers and for the time being myself. We're recording this, and for anyone unable to join live, you will have a chance to view recordings as well as a schedule of upcoming sessions at garrisoninstitute.org. We're really glad to be able to offer these sessions during this time of heightened uncertainty. So we're offering these for free. We would appreciate any donations you're able to give to support us and help us to be able to provide these opportunities for everyone to be able to connect and to our wonderful teachers, like John Tarrant, during these challenging times. So if you're able to donate, please do so on our website. Thank you. Finally, we might have time for some Q&A toward the end of the call. So you can post your Q&A questions in the panel, which is accessible on the lower part of your screen by hovering your arrow over the button. The chat box will be closed, so please direct your questions in the Q&A box. We'll get to as many questions as we can. We're on for an hour today, and please forgive us if we're not able to get to your questions. We're really grateful for this time. Thank you so much, John, for being with us, John and friends, and I'll turn this over to you.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. So we thought, well, I've been thinking this is an underworld time. And so that's a good time for meditation, and it's a good time in a way to do what we can to deepen our lives. When things are taken away from us, what we have becomes numinous and illuminated and alive. So, the notion that there are paths through the underworld and that there's beauty to be found in the underworld paths is a very ancient spiritual notion. And I want us to explore that today and explore some of the experiences that come with it. I'm very interested in the idea that the journey through the underworld has a deep value for us. And I'll start with one of the classic Western ideas about stepping into the underworld is Dante. And this is Robert Pinsky's translation, The Inferno. And midway on our life's journey, I found myself in dark woods, the right road lost. To tell about those woods is hard. So tangled and rough and savage that thinking of it now, I feel the old fear stirring. Death is hardly more bitter, and yet to treat the good I found there as well. I'll tell what I saw, how I came to enter, I cannot well say. Being so full of sleep, whatever moment it was, I began to blunder off the true path. But when I came to stop below a hill that marked one end of the valley, that had pierced my heart with terror, I looked up toward the crest and saw its shoulders already mantled in rays of that bright planet, which is the sun, that shows the road to everyone, whatever our journey. Then I could feel the terror begin to ease that churned in my heart's lake all through the night, as one still panting ashore from dangerous seas looks back at the deep he has escaped. My thought returns, still fleeing, to regard that grim defile that never left any alive who stayed in it. So, Dante thinks, the interesting thing that, he doesn't know how he got lost, and he got into a dark forest. In a certain sense, our whole culture, we've been dealing with crisis after crisis for a while now. And so, I don't know, we can say how we got lost, but here we are, and in danger. And, in my community in California, of the leadership, people who are faculty in my community, 3 of us have had our houses to some degree burned in the last 3 years because the fires come through. And one of us had to flee for her life from a debris flow in Montecito. And I'm aware that now we have the virus, and some of the virus will ease up, but the fires will be back. So there's an underworldy kind of time, and a time, but it's an intense time. And one of the things about being in the underworld and finding a path through is just not fighting with where we are, And so one of the things, people keep saying, well, let's get back to normal. We're going to get back to normal. But we don't know. And in a way, wanting to get back to normal is really a certain, we'll all be changed. And so wanting to get back to normal is really a way of trying to build a narrative of who I am, and I do this and I do that. But in a way, it's also liberating not to have our narratives and to be a little bit confined and pressed in. And if we're in a vessel of transformation, then the vessel's got, there's all sorts of things happen. There's fevers and sweating and dissolution, water and things being chopped up. I notice people, I just notice in myself and everyone around me that sometimes there's such a sweetness and generosity, and other times, there's a crankiness about small things. And that's all the underworld, That's what the underworld is. And there's an old Chinese, the koan, question and answer that goes, somebody says, when times of great difficulty visit us, how should we greet them? And the teacher says, welcome. So there's something about being able to respond, a call and response quality happens. And so thinking about the images that are handed to us from the underworld, Saiki and Eros is one of the great Greek stories, and Psyche's mother-in-law was the goddess of love and was jealous of her daughter-in-law. And so she gave her impossible tasks that she was intended to fail. And one of them, for example, was sorting seeds. There were a massive room full of very small seeds of vetch and poppy and lentils and the smallest things, barley. And she said, in order to live, she had to sort the seeds, and it was clearly a hopeless task, and Psyche gave up. This beautiful young woman gave up. But then the ants came and helped her. Ants came and sorted the seeds for her. And so the idea that you might also get, you might have mysterious and impossible tasks, you might also get mysterious and unforeseen help. So there's that. And then Psyche had to go into the underworld to get a box from the queen of the underworld, a box of beauty. And she was going to kill herself because she thought, well, I might as well just go there directly. But she was advised, given friendly advice, how to get into the underworld and not to kill herself, which was sort of what happened to Dante. that the description of the wood, the dark wood he found himself with, is very like the wood of the suicides in hell. And so the idea that it's good to stay alive is important, you know. It's good to protect oneself and stay alive. And so Saiki then, you know, she goes down, she meets there's a lame man with a lame donkey tying packages on it, and they keep coming loose. And so he asks for help, and she has to keep focused on her task and not turn away for that. And then she crosses the river and she's got coins in her mouth for the ferryman. She's got to hand him the coin in her teeth so she doesn't put down. She's got food for the dog, honey and barley for the dog of the underworld, who needs to be fed to get past and fed on the way back. So and then she has to ignore, as she's crossing the river, the ferryman's taking her, she has to ignore a corpse comes by and asks for help, and she has to again not get distracted. And then again 3 women ask her to help her with weaving. It's almost like the fates, you know. And then she's offered a feast in a very wonderful chair and wine, and she has to ignore that and just sit on the marble floor of the underworld and eat bread and water. And in other words, to be very simple and keep things very quiet at such time. So there's a time when in the underworld there's a certain integrity and discipline that we need. And we're doing that in our community by just having meditations. You know, every night you can get a meditation basically online, and I'm kind of enjoying it. It seems to be good for me. So there's that, and the Buddha also, you know, the Buddha, he was in a palace, and where the secret for him was that suffering was hidden, and so the thing he needed to find out to find wisdom was to find suffering, and so we can see that it can be good to go down and through, and he had to leave his palace and everything was comfortable and delightful about it, and go off into the forest in the dark and not know anything instead of being important. And that was how he transformed. You know, so we can see that there's an ancient wisdom path in the underworld, and then it comes to us, and we, you know, Dante says, I don't know what I did really, and I don't think we can say what we did. There's many things, you know, we're part of our culture. I feel, you know, I've made my own contributions to global warming and pandemics that come from that and so on. So, but truly it's mysterious that we live our lives and things come to us. And so we can't explain everything, but we can fully be here, and as soon as we're here, it's beautiful. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is begin a little meditation, and I'll give you a koan to sit with while you meditate, and we'll take it from there. Okay. So at the beginning of meditation, you know, the only thing about meditation you have to do is really not find fault with yourself and not find fault with your meditation. So it's not that you try and insert kindness or a loving feeling or calmness, because in a way that's just kind of coercive. You know, you're just telling life how it should be. And you have your natural response to life, however it is. But then the thing is not to find fault with that. And in meditation, in the Zen tradition, we use koans, and there's little stories that instead of trying to make yourself feel a certain way, you let that take care of itself. Let your heart take care of itself, and let it organize itself. And instead, of worrying about that, you sit with the little story. So here's a koan, here's a story. So a young person was wandering around, walking in the hills, visiting beautiful places, listening to the spring and the birds. And the young person came to a temple and asked for, temples were the inns, and so asked for lodging. And the teacher in the temple said, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm wandering around, visiting temples and places and on pilgrimage, really. And the teacher said, why are you doing that? And something stopped in the young person, and they said, oh, I don't know, really. I don't know. And the teacher said, not knowing is most intimate. And somehow that opened the heart of the person who was wandering around. Then they stayed and studied meditation and things like that. So not knowing is most intimate. So just sit with that. At the beginning of meditation, it doesn't really matter. Don't be picky about what's in your mind. We have a saying, quick, don't get ready. So any way you prepare yourself is, in a way, not necessary. So not knowing, intimate. And wherever your mind goes, just go to not knowing, intimate. Not knowing, most intimate. So, yeah. And no matter what comes up, as long as you don't find fault with it, and instead of trying to fix whatever issues might come up in the mind, just touch the not knowing. Whenever you become aware that something's going on, just touch the not knowing. Most intimate. And that way you'll find meditation's a rare thing. Koan meditation is one of those rare things in life that you can't do wrong. And if you just put yourself in the way of it, it will transform your heart. So good enough. Good enough. Good enough for the underworld. So not knowing. So we don't try to know in the underworld because we can't. It's unpredictable. Not knowing is most intimate. So I'll be silent a little and let you just feel that. Not knowing, most intimate. Not knowing is most intimate, wandering along, noticing spring blossoms and the sounds of birds. Hearing music pass through like a dream. Not knowing, most intimate. And wherever your mind goes, it's okay. We don't have to scold the horse. And meditation just turns the head a little bit towards the barn, and the horse has to find her own way. Not knowing is most intimate. Not knowing is most intimate. not knowing is most intimate. And you notice that you don't have to worry what your mind is doing or your feelings are doing. It's all right if you're afraid, intimate. It's all right if you're angry, intimate. And then it's all right, and if you can't, it's all right if you don't criticize yourself. And if you do criticize yourself, it's all right at some stage not to criticize that. And then, in a way, that open-hearted quality comes into the meditation. And you find out that at this moment you're not wrong. If you're sick or well or afraid or at peace or helping people or shut away, you're not wrong. And you're not in the wrong place. Not knowing is most intimate. Well, welcome back after meditating. And one of the things you might notice is that, in a way, meditation is it seems to be a necessary thing. Every culture's had something, some way of paying attention. I have a friend who's written a book on the temple caves of, the great temple caves, he calls the temple caves of France, with ancient Ice Age animals, and some of them very old, 40,000 years old, and others a mere 25,000 years old. And often, as you know, the drawings in the caves are far hidden away. And the artists are tremendous, but they had to go far into the back recesses of the caves to draw these pieces. And so he but thinks it's likely that there's some ceremonial temple aspect to it. And I think all cultures have had ways of drawing attention to the mystery of who we are and who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? And those kind of questions that, in a way, seem profoundly important, but it's almost as if asking them is more interesting than any response we could get to them. And so the Zen, I don't know, not knowing its most intimate is a way, not of rejecting the depth of life, but of sinking down into it and not taking off-the-shelf solutions and having to believe in them. Because as soon as we believe in an off-the-shelf solution, then part of us doesn't, and then we have to go at war inside or outside with other people who don't believe it. So not knowing its most intimate is a way to walk through the underworld. And knowing that there are things I can't know until I know them. I can't know what the results of a medical test are until they come back. And I can't know what the numbers are until they come back, that sort of thing. So, and yet, this moment of life, whatever we have, is here, and it's profound, and it's what we came for, is to have what we have now. And that's what the old teachers meant by intimacy. Intimacy was a jargon word. It came to be gradually used as a jargon word for waking up, enlightenment, those kind of things. The profound change that comes with an epiphany. Intimacy. And we can feel that. It's an important thing in life, intimacy, to be intimate with the wind and the sound of birds and the eyes of somebody we love and the eyes of a stranger, you know. So, to be intimate. And in a way, the thing to say that when we have the not knowing, then we might get the gifts that come, you know, with the journey. And Buddha's gifts were, you know, he left his palace in the legend of the Buddha. He left his palace and he went and fasted and did various activities with his mind to try and meditate and transform his unhappiness. And he just knew he was unhappy and he didn't know why, you know. And the unhappiness is a kind of veil. When it's here, we can tell it's a kind of veil between us and the world. And it's the, you know, the experience of, this can't be it, you know, this isn't what I paid for. And well, this can't be what I came here for, this is not it. And we can tell every time we do that, that's suffering. It's kind of the definition of suffering, really. And so, and yet to be here without, and just to notice, you know, is a beautiful thing. And there's this kind of spaciousness inside every moment, and there's a light in it. It just goes down and down and down. And if we follow that light inside, we'll find the whole universe is there. And we don't need, you know, intimacy doesn't really need special circumstances. You know, there's a great Polish poet who's good at the dark journey. Let's see if I can find her here. Her name is Anna Swir, S-W-I-R, and she has a poem that called here it is, very good. I carried bedpans, and she was a young girl. She was a young nurse's age. She must have been, I don't know, 15 or something, in Warsaw during the Second War, when the city was being demolished and people were being massacred and hiding and trying to survive. It's called I Carried Bedpans. I worked as an orderly at the hospital without medicine and water. I carried bedpans filled with pus, blood, and feces. I loved pus, blood, and feces. They were alive like life, and there was less and less life around. When the world was dying, I was only two hands, handing the wounded a bedpan. So that's the thing about welcome, you know, welcome. Like, oh, I can do this. And everybody who's ever been in hospital knows the amount of love you can have in circumstances that are very unpromising. You know, when you have a fever or you can't even change your own bedpan, you know. And the light that is in life is in that, the light that's in everybody. And you can tell Anna Swir, here's a poem she wrote later when she was an adult. Whether in daytime or in nighttime, I always carry inside a light. In the middle of noise and turmoil, I carry silence. Always I carry light and silence. And one of the great a couple of the great Zen teachers said things like, everyone has their own light. You know, if you want to see it, you look in. And you have to have confidence in the light that is always at work inside you. That's another koan. Light inside. So what I want to do now is I want to do a little bit more sitting, and I want to tell you a story. It's a story koan. And I think there are different ways to be in the underworld, but with the Buddha, when he purified, he got gifts. And one of the gifts he got was a woman had a dream. A woman who was a milkmaid had a dream, and she dreamed she had to get milk and take it into the forest to someone who needed it in the forest. And so she just followed her dream, which is rather wonderful, and then went into the forest and found Buddha was so thin and seemed to be almost glowing, and she thought maybe he was a spirit, but she said all she knew was to bring him the milk. So she did, and he drank it and began to revive, and then he began to, in a way, rejoin life and not flee so much, and rejoin. And so he got that gift, and then a dragon befriended him. Could happen in a forest, and so there's also in the underworld there are gifts and there's beauty, and I think it's really important. That's why we have music. It's really important to realize that beauty might come and reach us. There's a Zen story, a Japanese Zen story about there was a great battle in medieval times and an invasion, and one of the generals who was part of the battle was wounded and exhausted and lying on the beach, and the battle was over and his side had kind of won but at a terrible cost, and he's lying on the beach exhausted, and he hears somebody playing the flute, the wooden flute, the shakuhachi, and it just goes on. And his heart opened, and he felt completely at peace, and that completely free, even in his circumstances, wherever he was, he felt free and at peace. And so naturally he went off and became a Zen student, and then he became a Zen teacher, but he always taught people to play the flute. And so, as part of the gifts of the underworld, come to us. So they often come from such circumstances. So here's another. This is going to be a story about the gifts of the underworld. If I can find the thing to hit my bell with. Okay, you ready? Meditation, a little bit more. Just letting the bell come to you so you don't have to reach out for it. And in some way, then there's just the bell. There doesn't have to be a me knowing about the bell, just the bell. So, just not to find fault is the beginning, right? Not to find a problem with yourself. And maybe this moment is good, or maybe you don't have to know what it is. And if you don't know, you're at peace. So I became interested in all the original koans were invented by Chinese masters at times of civil war and famine. They were rather worse than the time we're in now, or at least the time we're in now is so far gotten to be. And when things like a third of the population died. And so it was very hard times. But they also had the sense of the beauty, and it's important to keep the wisdom tradition going, and so they passed it down with these stories. And so then I realized that, well, every culture has its stories, and that the stories from other cultures that rise to meet us on our wisdom journey have that same value, and we can meditate with them, and then they become koans, and they become modes of transformation for the people who are walking the path and handing it on. And it doesn't really matter what your circumstances are. You know, a month ago we were free to go out. Today we're not. You know, things like that. And so here's the there's a guy who sat with me who was a musicologist, and he and this was in Australia, and he was studying Indigenous music in the Northern Territory, and so he told me the story, and he thought it had something to do with Zen, and I did too. And so when I was looking for something to show that Zen is alive right now, I put it in a book called Bring Me the Rhinoceros. And so here it is, here's the story. In a place called Barunga in the Northern Territory of Australia, there was a singer named Maralung. He took dance trips around to traditional places. The ghost of a master songman called Balangiri and a bird called Bongridge gave Maralung his songs. The master songman lived so long ago that nothing of his life is known. And in the outback you see mysterious moving lights, will-o'-the-wisps. They're called min-min lights. They are thought of as spirit lights, and they have their own creation stories and dreaming, but they're dangerous. One night Maralung was sleeping, and in his sleep he was watching a min-min light. The light was blue and green and white and fell down across the sky from west to east. Balangiri, the master songman, and the bird appeared, and they flew after it. They followed the light and got a song there. And they came back into the camp where Maralung was sleeping, and Balangiri said, "Wake up. I have a song to teach you." So the dreamer woke up, and the master taught him the song. The bird sang too. The song was in the ghost language, so humans could sing it, but only spirits could understand it. Maralung told the story. He played for me, he sang the song, and he said, "Don't lose this song, you keep this one," said the old songman kindly. "I sang this song for you, it's yours." He spoke warmly like that. "All right, okay, you've got to remember it properly, this good song, this min-min light of yours." I went back and I continued to sleep after he'd left. But silly bugger, I fell asleep. "But don't you worry, I'll get it. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 times. I'll get it." And the musicologist was very alarmed because he thought, "Here's this marvelous song and I just lost it." I didn't know I had it, and now I've lost it. But the next night, Maralung dreamed again, and it happened the same way. Again, the lights fell down, blue and green and white, from west to east, and Balangiri and the bird went and got the song and came back. And Balangiri sang, and the bird sang. And once again, they spoke kindly, and they said, "Remember this good song of yours." And he sang, and again he sat up singing it to himself to make sure he remembered, but again he fell asleep. But this time in the morning he remembered, and he sang the song. So one of the nice things here is like, you'll get gifts. I mean, I probably don't need to say that, but there's something marvelous about, "Oh, don't worry, I'll get it, even if I forget it. It's not so hard to be in the underworld. You get gifts. People help you." So we'll just sit quietly for a bit. Where do songs come from? So perhaps in meditation, we feel the time, we feel our own lives walking through this time, coming from dark, through mysterious life into the dark. And gifts appear, songs appear. And beauty appears. And at each moment we realize, perhaps we realize, has a beauty in it. And we don't have to manufacture that, we just have to witness it and welcome it. And it appears whenever we welcome the moment. Maybe one time, 2 times, 3 times, maybe 7, 8, 9 times. I'll get it. To be patient with everything that brought us to this moment in our lives. There is nothing to be rejected because everything that happened brought us here. The things that gave us grief, the things that we loved, the losses we had, the things that we were ashamed of, the gifts we were given, the unlooked for help, the things we thought were mistakes. We can't really sort out one from the other. They're all the song that brought us here. And here is the only here we'll ever have. Here. Hearing the bell, hearing the music, hearing the time, feeling the time. And the person who said, have confidence in the light that's always working inside you, he also said, there's nothing I dislike, which seemed like a tall order when I first heard it. But then I realized, well, if I dislike something, I don't have to dislike that. And you notice that things open out, and the heart opens, and so, and you'll find, I think, with it does really all come out of not knowing and the gifts that come out of the mystery, and I think you find that. You know, often we think, I just need to be more kind or more loving, or more patient or more calm, or more something. But we can tell, in a way, that's not our business, you know, and that when freedom opens up and the heart opens, then you notice that, oh, you're already full of love for people and for animals. And that's not something that you have to add to get. It's something. It's almost like, it's more like you have to take away to get. You know, things fall away, and that's the gift of the underworld. Things fall away, and then you can see how much you love life and each other. So a couple of exercises for people, if you want. Try this. Like, just consider, well, what you know, if in the underworld things get burned and dissolved and they become very plain, and you know, like Saiki had to sit on the floor and have bread and water. And but you know, that's not so bad in a way. Basho, the great haiku poet, was asked how to write haiku, and he said, well, it's like simple vegetable soup, or it's like water running over a mountain stream. There's not very much there. It's transparent and translucent. And so he's like with Saiki sitting there, sort of being very simple. And the absolute simplest way to enter the moment is, of course, you know, with empty hands and not knowing things, you know, not knowing not trying to hold on to everything that will make us safe, or everything that will make us wise, or everything that even will make us kind. We know that there's something artificial about trying to gather stuff. That Buddha even noticed that he was trying to hold on to the comfort and sweetness in his palace. And so he left. But then he noticed he was trying to hold on to the feeling of being free of that. And he noticed that even wanting to be really enlightened and get free from suffering was completely like living in the palace and just wanting things. He was just wanting different things. And so when that wanting stopped, and he realized he wasn't afraid of being happy here, that was a profound moment. And so that's the big story for the Buddhist, the gift you get in the underworld, in the Buddhist world. Like Maralung getting his song from his dream. So I want to read a couple of poems. And here's a poem that I think is by a friend of mine who died called Tony Hoagland. And he was a person who's very passionate about life, and he's a marvelous poet. And he wrote here's a poem really about not knowing. He wrote, it's called Entangle. Sometimes I prefer not to untangle it. I prefer it to remain disorganized, because it is richer that way. Like a certain shrubbery I pass each day on Reba Street in an unimpressive yard in front of a home that seems unoccupied. A chest-high, spreading shrub with large, white, waxy blossoms, whose stalks are climbed and woven through simultaneously by a different kind of vine with small magenta flowers that appear and disappear inside the maze of the leaves, with like tiny purple stitches, so that the shrub has large waxy blossoms, and the little vine with tiny magenta flowers is all twined through it. And they appear and disappear inside the maze of leaves like tiny purple stitches. The white and purple combination of these species, one seeming possibly to be strangling the other, one possibly lifting the other up. It would take a botanist and a psychologist to figure it out. But I prefer not to disentangle it because it is more accurate. My ferocious love and how it repeatedly is trapped inside the fear of being sentimental. My need to control even the kindness of the world, rejecting gifts for which I am not prepared. Rejecting gifts for which I am not prepared. My inextinguishable conviction that I am scheduled for some kind of destination. I could probably untangle it, yet I prefer to walk down Reba Street instead, in the sunlight and the wind, with no mastery of my feelings or my thoughts, purple and ivory and green, not understanding what I am, and yet in certain moments remembering and bursting into tears, somewhat confused as the vines run through me and flower unexpectedly. That was one of the last poems he wrote as he was dying, and I kind of like the thing of him not trying to make sense of his life, letting his life come to him and burst out through him. And that there's a koan that we're very familiar with in Zen that goes, "What is meditation?" And the teacher said, "It's not meditation." "Why isn't it?" "What is it?" "It's alive." And so it's like that, So, and I want to read another poem, if I can find it. Where are we? This is the great Thomas Tranströmer, who was a Swedish poet who had a real feel for the inner life, and how the imperfection contains everything. Tourists have crowded into the half-dark of the enormous Romanesque church. Tourists have crowded into the half-dark of the enormous Romanesque church. Vault opening behind vault and no perspective. A few candle flames flickered. An angel whose face I couldn't see embraced me, and his whisper went all through my body. Don't be ashamed to be a human being. Be proud. Inside you, one vault after another opens endlessly. You will never be complete, and that's as it should be. You will never be complete, and that's as it should be. Tears blinded me as we were herded out into the fiercely sunlit piazza, together with Mr. and Mrs. Jones, her Tunica, and Signora Sabatini, Within each of them, vault after vault opened endlessly. So one other exercise you might want to do, like just at this moment, is you're probably in a room if you're in this seminar, in this webinar, and if you are, then look at something in the room and look at it, anything, without prejudice. A simple thing is good enough, anything, and without trying to influence it or influence your opinion about it. And if you're with somebody in a room, look at them. Again, without wanting them, anything from them, just to feel the time and appreciate this moment, just to see them. Because we can do some things for each other and it's good. You know, it's good to do the things we can do. But also, often we can't, but we can accompany each other and witness each other. And we'll find that love is not an act of will, it's something that's already here. You know? And so if you look at somebody and just take them in. And if there's not anybody with you, look at a window or a chair, a simple thing that's in its own way full of life and depth and beauty. The true traveler, is an old Chinese saying, the true traveler has no fixed destination and no set time of arrival. So you don't have to get through this moment. It's good enough to be here. Good enough to be here with the chair and the walls, the books in the room and the books, with the people we're with, if we're with someone, or someone's face you can see on the screen, you know. Just to be here, appreciating each other, to witness each other. And you'll find, you know, we're in a kind of retreat in this path through the underworld. We're moving along in a retreat, in a way being purified, in a way, you notice our hearts open. And I've always noticed during retreat that sometimes I have a really hard time earlier in the retreat, and as it goes on, I have less resistance to the moment. I'm not so cranky about having to be here. Then I noticed everyone becomes beautiful. Everyone has a beautiful face. Even people's feet are beautiful. Dogs are beautiful. Cats are beautiful. And so here I'll read the. I'll stop there. Actually, I have something else I'd like to read, but let me stop there. And I always like to hear from friends when we're teaching. We often teach together, and so I've got a couple of friends here who teach with Pacific Zen Institute, and Tess Beasley. How's it going? Anything to say?
Sure. This morning I entered kind of a dark wood because I discovered by some strange miracle that one or something has been siphoning off money from my bank account in sort of posing as a legitimate merchant. And so this has gone undiscovered for a little while. And of course, when I realized it, I had this flood of panic, and it felt very underworldy in the same sense that the virus has, because there was confusion. I wanted to grab hold of someone to explain what was happening. I had further paranoia about what might be at stake, if there is identity theft, or what might be the cause, or who, and no one seemed to be able to help me for quite some time. And there's also now this strange, difficult task of Saiki of I have to stop my bank account and redo kind of my entire sort of bill paying, giving structure. And as we've been sitting, I've just been thinking about, it seems like the time we're in, because I thought, oh, this feels exactly like the virus has felt. That there's a time of inherent losses in the underworld, and there's also a time of waiting, because we still don't know who's involved, what's at stake, if money's going to be able to come back, anything really, and we won't until we can. And how deeply there's a desire to want to hold on to something at the moment where so many great forces are sort of coming at us. This one being a tiny one in my life, but it feels exactly, I think, like everything feels that way now. But the gifts seem to be, the tenderness feels much more sweet. My cats are delightfully ignorant of what's happening, and so they were happy to purr and meow and want lunch, and a hug of my partner felt very tender, and I thought, the losses kind of give way to something, and the uncertainty sort of makes me have to settle in for the duration and what's opening. So it's nice to be with you in this underworld time. That's what I've noticed, is it's really nice to be here in these little Zoom temples. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Tess. Sorry about your money. It's like one of those things. Oh, well. Yes, so I hope it untangles, but that is that kind of underworldy tangle, isn't it? That's, you're the second person who's told me that story in a couple of days, actually. So must be going around like a virus. And notice what the mind does. I immediately think, oh wow, I wonder what my bank account. The mind just does these things without even consulting us. Maybe I'm even poorer than I thought. That's kind of, here we are. So, and here we are in what we're in, Alison, did you want to say anything?
Sure.
Any reflections on the time, or what you're noticing, dreams? Or
I've really been noticing the porousness of my mind's edges, and how the creaturely life, the life of the animals and the birds and cherry tree, and we have a fox family on our property, and gray foxes, and it's they're these strange creatures that are made, it seems like, of shadow and moonlight and stars or something, and we've been giving them eggs, and because they have this, these little kits, and the other night we put out 2 eggs, but the fox had learned how to count, and she realized that she could get 3 eggs, because sometimes we get 3. So she came back and she looked at us asking for the 3rd egg. And I completely understood what she wanted. It was clear, and that was that porousness. There's a kind of companionable sharing of our situation that I feel right now quite strongly. And the haiku from Isa comes to mind, where he says, he's a poet, a Japanese poet who has a great feel for that companionable quality to the small pieces of life. And he says, "Don't worry, spiders, I keep house casually." That's it.
well, thanks. That's wonderful. Isa, yes. So, how are you doing? Like, I wonder how it went for you with the exercise of just looking at somebody, without an agenda, without, and just looking at, just looking out the window that you've looked out 1,000 times, perhaps, or more, and not thinking you know what you're looking at, not knowing, and just being here. So So there's that, I think. And so I wanted to do a couple more things. I wanted to read, just for fun, in terms of like the small creatures who share our lives. And I keep, people keep showing me their cats on when we're in a meeting like this, and so I wanted to read, this is my favorite cat poem at the moment. And this is Christopher Smart, who was a 18th century English poet who went gradually mad, but in a charming sort of way. And he would, his madness took the form of seeing everything as divine, as being touched by the divine. And so he wasn't completely, he had a point, you know. and he was, but he would ask people to kneel down and pray with him when he met them in the London streets. And and one of his friends was complaining about this to another of his friends, and the friend who was being complained to was Dr. Johnson, who was a famous acerbic and scornful, sort of brilliant scholar who composed one of the great early dictionaries. Dr. Johnson, he was called, and Christopher Smart had such innocence about him that even Dr. Johnson said, "Well, I just happily pray with Kit Smart. I just leaf pray." He said, "I just leaf pray with Kit Smart as anyone alive." So, you know, if you can't just stop in the middle of your day and pray with him, what's life coming to? You know? So here's Kit Smart's "My Cat Geoffrey. For I will consider my cat Geoffrey, for he is the servant of the living God, duly and daily serving him. For the first glance of the glory of God in the east he worships in his way. For this is done by wreathing his body 7 times around with elegant quickness. Then he leaps up to sniff, to catch the musk, which is the blessing of God upon his prayer. And he rolls upon prank to work it in. And having done duty and received blessing, he begins to consider himself. For this he performs in 10 degrees. First he looks upon his forepaws to see if they are clean. For secondly, he kicks up behind to clear away there. Thirdly, he works it upon stretch with the forepaws extended. And fourthly, that was thirdly. Fourthly, he sharpens his paws by wood. That's my nice desk. For fifthly, he washes himself. For seventhly, he flees himself that he may not be interrupted upon the beat. For eighthly, he rubs himself against a post. For ninthly, he looks up for his instructions. For 10thly, he goes in quest of food. So these are the prayers of the cat. You know. And so everything we do has that sacred quality. And the final thing I want to say here is, I guess, in Buddhism there's a deity really called Kuan Yin, who is an adaptation of a Sanskrit wisdom figure into Chinese, and she sort of changed gender and became a goddess in China, and she had to go to hell for some complicated administrative bureaucratic reason in her life, and but when she went to hell, she was so innocent. She was like Christopher Smart and his cat. She just saw everybody and sort of saw they were beautiful, and then green things began growing in hell, and trees and flowers and birds came and began to sing, and the demons began to think kind thoughts, and so they got to have a deputation and asked her, could she please leave hell, because they didn't feel they were doing their duty by make people suffer, because people couldn't tell the difference between hell and heaven, you know, hell and the enlightened world. And so she left, but when she went, all the children gathered, caught on her robe and went up, and so sailed up out of hell. So, and she still to this day can drag you out of hell. So she's one of the images of the Bodhisattva image. The Bodhisattva is someone who accompanies us, and that, you know, if you want to know what to do, well, you know, there's a project called Dharma Relief that's Chinese Zen teachers doing, we're helping with, which is like to get masks for physicians and medical people. Things like that are going on all the time. So there are things to do, and in a way that's Kuan Yin, just smiling and saying, oh, we can do something in this world. So the next final thing I want to do is something with Michelle Riddle. Is going to, I don't know if you want to say anything, and certainly she's going to, we have Bodhisattva vows that we just sing at the end of every meeting, and I thought it'd be great, a sort of gift to all of us if Michelle sang, and I persuaded her kindly. She's one of our Zen teachers, so she's going to do that for us. Very good.
Thanks. I'm going to try to do this without a microphone. Hi, everybody. I think this is a vow that will remind you of something you've heard in various Zen temples if you've been to any of them. This one was put to music by a man named Richie Doming, who was a really lovely musician who died and isn't with us anymore, but he put his heart into putting a lot of the sutras to music, and so it's special to us. The four boundless vows. I vow to wake all the beings of the world. I vow to set endless heartache to rest. I vow to walk through every wisdom gate. I vow to live the great Buddha way. I vow to wake all the beings of the world. I vow to set endless heartache to rest. I vow to walk through every wisdom gate. I vow to live the great Buddha way. I vow to wake all the beings of the world. I vow to set endless heartache to rest. I vow to walk through every wisdom gate. I vow to live the great Buddha way.
Thank you, Michelle. That's great. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to Garrison Institute, and we're at pacificzen.org if you want to find out our meditation that we're providing for you. And thank you. It's a heartfelt, beautiful thing to sit together in our time. So Amy, I think it's over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, John. Thank you to all of your friends who brought us such beautiful, rich gifts of stories, poetry, music, and wisdom. Thank you, everyone who's joined us on the call. Our next session is with Krishna Das on Tuesday, April 28th. Please join us and keep checking garrisoninstitute.org for all the upcoming session dates and to view the recordings of this call and others. We're providing, again, these sessions for free. So if you'd like to support us and our other efforts to keep everyone connected at this time, please consider donating to garrisoninstitute.org. May everyone be happy, healthy, and safe.
Thanks, Amy. I don't know if you can hear us, but thanks. Very good. Thanks, everyone. We'll do on the phone. Thanks all. This is great. Really touching. Thanks.